Okay, official debate happening. We have Deonteleologist, we have Azgerod. For this debate, Deonteleologist has taken the position that given the option to save 5 people or save 1 person, all things being equal, you ought to flip a coin. Asgrod's taken the opposition. Winner will be based upon who concedes. We don't get a vote concession. We'll put it to a voting poll in which you, the audience, can decide on who you think performed better overall in the debate. No moderation, 45-minute time limit. Thank you both for debating. You can get started.
Cool. So, I mean, my position is basically premised on the principle of um, equality of moral patience, basically, or not necessarily all moral patience, but um, at least human beings. So, the principle is basically that you should give each person an equal, like that, you should when you're put in this sort of situation, you should give each person the highest possible equal chance of being saved. So if you're forced to choose between saving a group of 5 and saving 1 person, then the highest equal chance you can assign each person is 50%. Um, and you would do that by flipping a coin. Likewise, if you were forced to save one from 3 different groups, no matter what the size of each group was, as long as they were not overlapping at all, then the highest equal chance you could give to each person would be 33.33%. Um, and so that's the basis of the thesis that you should flip a coin.
Wait, so like I think I don't understand the probabilistic weighing here. What is how does what you just said apply to the 5 people versus the 1 people trolley thing?
Well, so don't necessarily think about it as a trolley problem because the trolley problem is a little bit different. The trolley problem is you would kill 1 person to save 5, or you would do nothing and um, let 5 die and sort of spare one. This one is a case where you're given an opportunity to save 5 or to save one. If you do nothing, everyone will die. But you only have time, let's say, to save one group. The group will either be just the individual one or the group of 5. So the principle is that you should give each person involved the highest potential chance of being saved that is consistent with everyone else getting the same chance. So in this case, that's 50%. If you so say you have 5 people, that's group A, and you have 1 person, that's B. If you land on heads, then you'll save A, and if you land on tails, you'll save B. So each person in the entire equation has a 50% chance of being saved, which is the highest that you could assign everyone.
Okay, I get why you would like yeah. So if you want to make the decision that will give each person um, a 50% chance of survival, then I get that. So I guess my question is, why do you want to give each person a 50% chance of survival?
Oh, because each person is a human being, and the principle of equality um, that I gestured at would say that no person deserves a greater chance of being saved in this situation than anyone else.
Right.
So if you're a utilitarian, then you deny that, right? You say it's not about the individual, it's about the aggregate. If you want to take that line, we can argue that, but I just think that utilitarianism um,
Okay.
ultimately can't do what it's supposed to do.
Yeah. I maybe at some point we could have another discussion about that kind of the probabilistic thing because that's an interesting one. But I think I'm going to take the argument in a different direction. So my point is just that you can't really make a decision with the coin flip at all, because you still have to, after you've made the coin flip, you see what the outcome is, and
Hmm.
you still have to make the decision of whether or not to go along with your previous commitment to follow the coin flip or not. And so you're still making the decision about whether or not to save the 5 people or the 1, and you have to have some other criteria um, to decide between those things, I guess. Does that make sense?
I mean, you can stipulate that, but I don't see why it would follow. Like, why is it that um, because there is the added step that one
Mm.
must act on the coin flip, that one isn't really acting on the coin flip?
Well, yeah, so I guess, yeah, that's a good point. So you're just choosing. The only difference is that you're like, in one hand you're choosing to follow the coin flip before, and then later you're choosing to follow the coin flip after, I guess. But the point is that afterwards you actually know what the coin flip was, right?
Hmm.
So your choice boils down to, um, in terms of like consequence, it's not like, do I give each person a 50? Yeah, yeah. So here's the point, right? So after you've made the coin flip and you know what the outcome was, and you know what the outcome would be if you were to follow the coin flip or not follow the coin flip, then you're no longer giving everybody a 50% chance of um, survival. You are just making a decision to um, either save 5 people or save 1 person, and you're choosing between them. It's no longer the coin that's making the decision, it's you making the decision.
Well, so that's one way of this scenario playing out. In which case you were never really committed to the coin flip at all, but the proposition is just about what you ought to do, and um, unless you're arguing that it's like metaphysically impossible for you to follow the outcome of the coin flip, then I don't see what the problem is.
So I guess the idea is that, like, you can follow the you can it's perfectly metaphysically possible for you to follow the coin flip, but it's also just as possible for you to not follow the coin flip, and it's a decision, it's a choice that you make once you see the outcome. So you're no
Hmm.
longer it's no longer probabilistic. You're no longer making a random. It's no longer giving each person a perfectly random chance of survival. You're giving them you're deciding who survives and who doesn't.
I mean, that's like arguing that the lottery isn't random because once you pull the winning ticket, like it's decided.
No, it's like that. No, because once you pull the winning ticket, um, it's like, they still they no longer are allowed to choose not to give you the money, right? There's some external force, like the law, that forces them to make that decision. It's no longer in their hands, right? The law like enforces
Well,
the
but like
choice with the
still, it's
coin.
metaphysically in their hands. It's just that they avoid that outcome. Like they choose not to lie about who won the lottery because if they're found out, they know that like they're fucked. But um, once like the fact that once you flip the coin, it's still on you to follow through with it. Um, doesn't change, or at least I don't see why it would change what you ought to do.
Well, I guess like it does from a because I guess like the thing with the um like I would say I agree that your comparison with the lottery is like fair, right? But I would just say that like it 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 also is, as you say, it is also true for the lottery. But if the lottery was a moral question, then yeah, like it would still apply to the lottery. Like the person who is about to give the person the money would have to choose, well, I could choose to go through with my previous decision to give them the money based on, the ticket they chose, or I could just not and give it to somebody else, and you'd have to weigh like which one you want based on like the consequences or something, right? Like in this circumstance, you
Would you
still
have to
have
do that?
Like you still have, well, you don't have to do it based on the consequences, but you still have to make the decision. It's still in your hands whether or not you want to um
Yeah, that's true. It's still
like
in your hands.
and the point is that now you have the knowledge. Like now when you make the decision to like before when you were like, oh yes, I will honor the coin flip. You were doing that to give everybody an equal chance. But now, the second time you make the decision, by trusting the or by honoring the coin flip, you're actually determining what occurs. You know what will occur if you um, honor the coin flip. You know what will occur if you don't honor the coin flip. You're no longer making it random. This decision is now like um, outcome based. Like you have full knowledge of what will occur in both cases. So you have
Yeah.
the moral
So
responsibility of
I,
those
s-
outcomes.
I mean, I see that it's outcome based. I don't see how that challenges what you ought to do. I'm no, I'm sorry. I don't see when I say outcome based. That was the wrong phrase, I believe. I see that it's now in your hands, right? And that you now have knowledge um, over the possibilities, and it's up to you whether you're going to honor your commitment. Um, but I'm having trouble seeing how that causes problems for what it is that you actually ought to do.
Well, it just requires that you provide some other justification for honoring the coin flip now. Because before your justification was that it will give them a 50-50 chance, whereas now you can't use that justification because it doesn't give them a 50-50 chance. It gives like whichever, like let's say the coin flip decides that you should save the 5 people. Now you are you're no longer giving the uh, the one person a chance at surviving. You're choosing for them to die and for the 5 people to survive. So like you can't use the same justification. You'd have to have
But you
some
don't
other
need
thing.
further justification. The I mean, the fact is, like, there's a group of five and there's a group of one. Um, you need to act because if you don't, then everyone will die. And so you go through some reasoning. You think, well, how do I honor the principle that I should give everyone an equal, that I should like respect everyone's life equally? Um, well, I should give everyone the highest possible chance of the highest possible identical chance for everyone of survival. And so you have to find some way um, of actually assigning the 50-50 probability of determining, look, it's 50-50. That means one group's going to get saved and another isn't. So I have to sort of somehow, right? It doesn't have to be a coin flip. If you have like some sort of uh, probability machine that can just like randomly assign you A or B, you can use that as well. And then once it's been assigned, it's done. Okay, I gave both parties an equal chance, and now I have to act.
Well, but you don't though, right?
Well, I mean, technically, no, you don't have to act. Now I mean, it's clearly the case, I think, that you ought to act, and what you ought to do is here being mediated by the principle of equality of human life. And so, what that dictates is for you to give an equal chance to each life. Then you have to do the coin flip or the probability machine or whatever, and then once you do that, you have respected the machine and now you ought to act.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, no, I agree that that's uh, the criticism I was voicing doesn't really hold up. That's a fair point. So, however, let's inspect the foundations a bit
Try
more.
another one. Yeah.
Yeah, let's try another one. Um, so if we look back at so you believe that every person should, in any circumstance where someone's making a decision about like the positive or negative outcomes of some people, every person involved, every affected person should have an equal chance of getting all the the best outcomes, right?
things being equal, so qualification would be, say, like, if you have certain special relationships that obligations might arise out of. For instance, if one group of five are complete strangers, and then um, the single individual is like your mother or a family member or a friend, then I think it would be permissible for you to give that special relationship a little bit extra weight and for you to make the decision based on that. But all things being equal, yeah, I think so.
Um, so do you think it's necessary to view it only in terms of individuals? Because if you look at the group, then you can say, well, there may be all things may be equal when we're looking at the individuals, but when we look at the groups involved, all things are not equal. And in fact, and one group has 5 times as many people in it, and that could be um, a factor that kind of um, is influencing, right? Where you want to save the 5 people rather than the one person because you value more people more than you value fewer people.
Well, the question is how you would be able to reconcile that with the principle of equality of human life.
Well, because you would say that each human is equal, right? Which means, like, let's say they have a value of 1, so the group of 5 has a value of 5, and the group of 1 has a value of 1, right?
Okay, I reject the idea that you can simply add up the values of human beings.
Why? What else would you do? Like,
You
what's
would
wrong with
give
that?
each individual an equal chance of survival.
Yeah, but like that.
What's wrong with it?
Well, because
Uh,
so to me, like if I think about, okay, well, what is worse, like a single person getting killed, or like the Holocaust or something? I'm like, okay, well, the
oh,
Holocaust was
well,
worse.
there's a difference between that because you have the added element of it being of the killing being racially motivated, and also the threat
Sure.
to an entire culture.
Yeah, but
And
that's not why I'm saying it's worse. But like, sure, I'll remove those elements. So like, if I'm thinking like, okay, one person dying, how bad is that? Versus like 5 people
versus
dying, how
like
bad is that?
five
Uh,
people picked at random.
yeah, I don't care like who they are. Yeah, like
Okay.
one person dying
Yeah.
versus like 5 people dying. Um, to
Okay.
me, like I think the outcome of the 5 people dying is just much worse. So if I'm in a
Hmm.
circumstance where I can choose between these outcomes, then I can do it. Let's see, I can choose the smaller group to die, I can choose the larger group to die, or I can leave it up to fate. Like let's say those are the 3 options we're considering. Like leave it up to a
Hmm.
50-50 coin flip. If I choose the larger
Well, that's
group
the
to die,
difference between leaving up to fate, right? It's actually the 50-50 coin flip wouldn't be leaving it up to fate. It would be like
yeah, it was a correction.
acting based on the
Yeah, yeah,
equal human life principle. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So like, yeah, it's a correction. Good point. So like, yeah, just the choice is like choosing the one person to die, choosing the 5 people to die, or choosing to decide it based on a coin flip. If I
Hmm.
choose the one person to die, then I would say I have selected for the least bad possible outcome. If I select for the 5 people to die, I've selected for the worst possible outcome. And if I choose the random option, then I allow for the possibility of the worst possible outcome or the best possible outcome. So it seems clear that I should choose the best possible outcome, which is just to allow the one person to die.
Right. So your reasoning, right, for calling these best possible versus you're for ranking these outcomes in this way rests on the ability to aggregate human lives, right, or to assign them values and then to add them up and compare them. Um, versus, I think that like intuitively, that's an attractive principle, but once you realize that it clearly contradicts the equality of human life principle, I think that that compounded with the fact that there's no perspective from which we can really say it's um, better or worse, right? So if I select um, or if I decide that I'm going to act based on the equality of human life principle, then I can justify to each person involved why it is that I've decided to flip a coin. right? I say, well, look, every single one of you has a very high moral worth. You're all, human beings. And so I want to treat each of you totally equally. So I'm going to give you each the highest possible chance, the highest possible equal chance of being saved versus um, if you take the utilitarian route or the consequentialist route, then how could I possibly justify to the individual that I've just decided that actually I don't need to take the equality of human life principle into account, right? Right? How could I possibly justify to the one person that this is uh, better, right? Better for whom, right? There's the each individual in the five, and for each of them, it'd be worse if they died and if they weren't saved. And for the one individual, it'd be worse if they weren't saved. But there's no sort of view from nowhere that you can get to that is actually able to explain why it'd be worse to save the one rather than to save the group of five.
Right. Like I don't when I talk about like what is good and what's bad, I don't think about like I do just think about what occurs. Like if the person um if if like as you say, the person who is if you choose to save the group of five people, the one person who is not saved, it is horrible for them, and it's good for the five people who did get saved. If you choose to save the one person, then it's really bad for the five people who did not get saved and great for the person who did get saved. If you leave it up to fate, then it's going to be possibly good or possibly bad for for each group, right? And like for I don't feel the need to like it's going to be bad for some people no matter what, right? No matter what outcome, it's going to be bad for some people. So I'm
Right.
just trying to make it as not bad as possible. I don't care if they look at my decision and be like, "Oh, that's not fair." Like I don't really care if it's fair. I care
Well,
if it selects for the best possible outcome.
but again, I'm trying to push back on the premise, the tacit premise that it's actually less bad if you save the five than it is if you save the one, right? Seems to me that what matters here to respect the equality of human life principle is to respect each human life. And if you decide just to save the five, then you're totally disregarding the value of the one. And you're saying that, look, the fact that there are more people on this side means that don't have to take your interests into account.
Okay, so I don't know if I'm wrong about this, but I think like the what you mean by the equality of human life principle is just that each person has the same value as another person. Like in this circumstance, like we don't have any other.
Right,
It's
because all things
it
being
doesn't
equal, yeah.
it doesn't necessarily have the probabilistic um, normative claim in there. Like we should give everyone the 50-50 chance of survival kind of thing. Like that's like something that you um,
Right, that's what I think follows from it. But
right.
yeah,
Yes.
that would be an add-on, yeah.
Okay. So I also agree with like you know, uh, the principle of like all humans being equal or whatever, right? Um, it's just that I just, again, like ethically, how I act with that, I think is different, right? And no, I wouldn't be disregarding the value of the one person entirely. So I wouldn't be saying that there's some difference in worth between that one person and each of the other five people, right? I'm just saying five is greater than one, right? I'm not saying that on one side of the equation you have a zero, right? I'm saying that it's one versus five. So yeah, like in my view, your way of doing it is like saying like, oh, it's equal. Like these outcomes, we're going to treat them equally. We're going to give it's like 50-50. It doesn't matter what happens. Like
What do you
we
mean
have
outcome?
like the outcome of 5 people dying or the outcome of one person dying, which would seem to me that you're valuing each of the 5 people in the group of 5 times less than you're valuing the life of the one person.
So you're valuing okay, your charge is that I'm valuing each person in the group of 5 times less than the single individual?
Yeah, not in terms of the probability of survival, but in terms of which outcome like you're happy to have happen, right? Like you're
Well,
saying, like to me, the only way I would leave a decision up to a 50-50 chance was if I thought each outcome was like equally as good or equally as like acceptable or whatever.
right.
So based on that, I
And
infer that you think those outcomes are just as fine, as good. In which case, you'd have to be valuing the 5 people
it's not
five times
it's
less
not
each.
about the outcome. The interpretation I have of the human equality principle is basically that so long as everyone's value of their human life is taken into account and respected equally, then um, the outcome is in this case, right? Then either outcome is justified, so long as we get there the right way. But it seems to me that your decision that it would be better, right? Because you think it's just sort of a simple math problem. You say, well, look, everyone's life has some value n, 5n is uh, greater than n, so we should save the 5. But what what is required to get to that conclusion is the ability to abstract from any of the individual's own particular perspective and to posit some view from nowhere, basically.
No, it's just my
Like,
view, right?
what do
It's
you
just
mean?
like I don't know what you mean, like a view from nowhere. Like it's just a view from me. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, it's not bad for you if that person dies,
Well, yeah,
right? It's
it
not.
is bad for me. Like that's the only sense of bad in which I mean. Like I I'm a
So
like a
it's
more
not. So you're
subjectivist,
not
right? Like
saving them for their sake. You're saving them for your own sake.
I'm saving them for their sake because their sake is like instrumental to my sake because I feel bad if I hurt people and I see people die by my hand. Like
Well,
I
I
don't want
mean,
that to happen.
I think that it's useful to have the distinction between killing and letting die. I don't know how you might not
Yeah,
feel the same
whatever.
way,
Yeah.
but but the point is that, look, for you to really be treating each person's life as equally valuable, you have to give them all an equal chance
No,
of
like
being saved, because again, for there to be this 5 for whom it is overall worse if you don't save them, then the only way I can understand such a thing is if there were this like extra entity, right? This the group, and it would be bad for the group if they all died. But as a matter of fact, there's just the individuals, and for each individual, they don't want to die. They want to be saved. It's better for them if they're saved than if they're allowed to die. But that's true of the individual on the other side as well. And so I don't see how you can just add up the numbers and get this detached perspective. Like everyone there doesn't want to die, wants to be saved, and you have to respect all of those wishes. And so I don't see, like, it requires a super individual, right? A group or something like that for
oh, it just
it to
requires
be.
an observer who can count.
No, okay. There's an observer who can count, but the fact that you can count does not entail that they can be aggregated.
Right. So like the way that I aggregate them is I do my morality based on like empathy, right? On like I think, oh, Something's bad if it makes me feel bad, and I try to extend my empathy as far as I can, so that like um, I feel bad about things that I kind of should feel bad about, I guess, right? So when I'm in a circumstance like this, I'd be looking at the outcomes and I'd be thinking, how bad would I feel if I like extend my empathy in this circumstance and see how everyone's feeling, right? So in the one case, we have this one person who's like, oh, I'm getting sacrificed so that like fucking five other random strangers don't die. I guess, rip, sucks to be me. Well, great. Glad this guy did the calculus right or whatever. Anyway, feels really bad for that person, right? And then the other people are and that person dies, right? And I have all this empathy associated with that one person dying, right? And it sucks. So I feel like this emotional pain from that guy dying. Then I look at what's the other outcome, right? Five people die. Okay, so the first person dies. I get all that negative emotion. I feel really bad for them. The second person dies. I feel all that same negative emotion. Third, fourth, fifth, all this negative emotion just five times, like it happens five times. I feel five times as bad, five times as many people, you know, their parents don't come home today, you know, that kind of shit, right? Um, and so to me, I just I do extend my empathy on a um like my the emotions add up for me, right? Like if five people die, then I'd feel five times as bad, roughly speaking. And that's how I base my morality. And I think that's like a reasonably good way of basing your morality, right?
Yeah. So if that's how you base your morality, then uh, I mean, I think that you have an impoverished conception of morality to actually argue that point in this debate with the amount of time we have left is not going to be feasible. Um, so, I don't really know what to say. Like,
Yeah, it seems like
if what you think you ought to do is just based on what your empathy leads you to do, then um, given suitable environmental inputs, uh, you could end up leading a life that looks exactly identical to Hitler's. I don't see how
true
that's a
and
very
true, but I'm
very good conception of morality.
well, true, but like so actually like usually the really bad stuff doesn't happen because people are extending their empathy too much and trusting their emotions too much. It's usually because people start saying like, "Oh, well, I've got this logical justification for like, oh no, well, the Jews are gonna like come and kill us. It's for the greater good. It's for the master race, you know. We're gonna make a golden age after we kill all these Jews. It's gonna be sick." But
Why
I
do you think that's rationally motivated rather than emotionally motivated?
well, it's both, but it's rationally justified, right? And like
I mean, it
that's
could
how
be empathically justified as well.
no, it's nobody was like thinking about how it was going to be for the Jews. There's no way. There's no way somebody's like,
No, they don't have to think. I mean, they could think, look, Jews are not proper objects of empathic concern,
yeah, exactly. That's
but I
why
have
like
to have empathy for the all of the Aryans and how horrible life will be for them if I don't go in and exterminate these Jews.
yeah, which is why like I agree. If you're going to have an emotionally based moral system, you absolutely need to extend empathy like unequivocally among all people and all beings that have even a remote chance of sentience. Um, because otherwise you could end up doing some crazy, horrible shit.
Well,
So I
then
agree,
that
but I
stops
do
right
that.
there. Like your morality goes beyond just your empathic concern.
Well, what do you mean? Because I justified that with a should, so there's something more base. Is that what you mean?
No, because you think that empathy is not enough, and you need to have this sort of rational acknowledgement of
No,
all beings um,
I'm
for
just
whom
saying.
empathy is a proper emotion to extend to them.
Well, I'm not saying empathy is not enough. I'm saying like kind of the guilt, the perspective feeling of guilt or whatever isn't enough unless you extend empathy to all the creatures that like you'd want to. But like yeah, I get what your point. Like it's not a firmly based kind of moral framework because like then you have to ask like, well, So you think it's why, what, how is that justifiable? Does it really feel bad if you don't think about it? If you don't think about the Jews as people, then it doesn't feel bad to kill them. So it's like whatever. And I see that point. But I think by and large, this method of just extending your empathy as far as possible and then trusting it about what it concludes doesn't really lead to any bad like Holocaust-like scenarios at any point.
I mean, okay.
Well, I mean, like,
Um,
I don't think it does. Like, what would it be like? If I extend my empathy to all humans and then all animals, and then like even insects, if I feel like they might be conscious, like, what's the possibility that I'm gonna like end up committing a Holocaust?
all I'm trying to point out is that you can't extend your empathy in those ways without some sort of more cognitive or, I guess, rational uh, decision about whom is the proper object of
Oh yeah.
empathic concern.
Oh yeah, true, true, true. It's not. I don't mean to say that my moral system is only, or that my moral beliefs are only based on, um, this some moral axiom about empathy. Like obviously you need logic, you need empiricism to even
Right,
have subjects about which to speak.
right.
Yeah.
So then, so my argument would be that our logic, our reason can lead us to the principle of equality of human life, and that um,
Yeah, I agree with that.
the, and that once we have that, right, the utilitarian answer that says every time you're in a situation where you can save five or save one, you should save five. To me, uh, clearly just sort
Yeah.
of it's like how does it work, right? Is it like that one of the persons just sort of negates the other person so that
No,
as soon as you have two and one, you should always save the two?
no, because again, for me, it's about reducing like empathetic negative emotion, right? So in the case of the five people, there's more negative empathetic emotion if I kill them than if I kill the one person, or if I allow them to die, or don't save them, that kind of thing, right? So it's not about like no one negates anyone. It's just that when I look at the whole action of killing five people as opposed to the whole action of killing one people, there's more negative emotion associated with killing the five people than the one. But essentially, like if I can sum up the only point of disagreement we have, it seems that we both agree on the principle of like the equality of human beings and their worth. It's just that we interpret that differently, and you interpret it as therefore we should give each person in any situation an equal chance of uh, being saved, like in this circumstance. Whereas I think I don't care about the chance of being saved. I don't care about fairness of chance of survival. I care about selecting for the outcome that has the fewest of these um, equal beings uh, being harmed, right? So
Well,
that'll be my.
so
I think yeah.
that sounds like a principled conclusion, but the other one seems to be more about emotion. So I mean, would it be the case that if you had three people who look like um, your the childhood bully who used to
Oh wait,
torture
like
you in school, and one person who looks like a relative of yours, then because you don't have the empathy for these people who just look like your childhood bully, and you do have the empathy for someone who looks like your relative, then you should choose the one, and you should not obey the more reason-based principle of um, saving as many as possible.
well, as I say, you need to. It doesn't work if you don't extend your empathy to all people equally. Like
Okay.
this is the empathy is what is spread like equally amongst all of the equal human lives or whatever, right?
So do
So
you
it,
really
it
think that, as a matter of fact, you do have the same amount of empathy for every person?
no, but in a circumstance where I was making this decision, what I should do is extend my empathy toward them and then act based on it.
But earlier you said just the opposite, that what you should do is determined by your empathy.
No, that's what I just said as well. Wait, what's the difference?
Well, no, this time you said what you should do is based on your ideal level of equal empathy for everyone. But
No,
earlier,
I've
I took
always
you to be
said
saying,
like what you should do is A, extend your empathy to all people equally, and then B, to act based on that empathy. That's what I believe. If before it sounded like I was saying something contradictory to that, that's not what I meant.
okay, okay,
But yeah,
okay,
I'm
then.
pretty yeah, I think we just like disagree on how to apply that. But I mean, I guess you could go into saying that like my moral view like is dumb or something, but like or it doesn't hold up or something. But um, I think yours is fair. I just don't think it's very intuitive with respect to emotion and like how people because I think emotion is really the basis of most people's like morality, how they actually act.
I think that's true
Um,
as well. Yeah,
and I think that like
emotion is the basis.
yeah, and I think your way of doing it, like giving everybody the equal possibility, like allows things that would be very regrettable. Like you could extend your, like for example, your logic would follow that like if you're choosing between some person, one person, and 8 billion people, that it would be equal to do the you should coin flip it, right?
Well, it
And I would say
depends, right? If it depends, because there might be additional reasons
yeah,
that
but there
count
isn't,
on the
right?
side of 8 billion.
But
Well,
let's
if
say there
like
isn't.
if it weren't the case that, you were actually wiping out the entire population and entire cultures at a time, and that you weren't um,
Okay, well,
making life impossible for the rest of the people on the planet, right? If all these things that are sort of built in that motivate the intuition that it would be impermissible to select the one in favor of the 8 billion. But if it were the case that none of those actually applied, then yes, I would say that you should flip a coin because you should give an equal chance of survival to everyone because of the equal value of each human life. And my basic point that I have been trying to get across, and it might not have been as clear as I would have liked it to be, is that I don't see how it is that you can just add up all these
but I've shown how I
individual
can, right?
lives. Well, I mean, you said that you can, and that
Well,
it's
do you
just based on
understand?
your
Like,
emotional empathy,
yeah,
right?
does
Because you have
that
more
seem like a
empathy for, uh,
does that seem like a something I can do? Like, do you see how I make
but
my
I mean,
decisions?
I can see how you can, but I don't see how it follows because I see just as easily how
Oh yeah.
equal empathy for every human life can lead you to the principle that I'm advocating, which is that you should give everyone a fair chance, as high of a equal opportunity of survival as possible, because each person has the same intrinsically valuable human life. And to each person, you should be able to justify how it is that you came to the decision to save them or to save the other. And I think the most clearly justifiable one is to give them all the same chance of survival.
Yeah, I don't think you need to justify it to each individual. I think it's like, and if you did justify it to each individual, under my view, then the way you do it is by just explaining your utilitarian like view of it, right? But yeah, I agree. Like, there's nothing that leads one logically from the like principle of like everyone's equal to my particular interpretation of how we should go about uh, kind of protecting that value. But I would also say that it doesn't follow, like yours doesn't follow either. It's just like a particular interpretation of what we should do based on that. What should we be making equal? Should we be making some number equal among them and then adding up the number and that kind of thing? It's really just like yeah, it doesn't follow either way. You need something else motivating the divergence between my view and yours. And I think that generally the difference is that mine is more like an emotional, empathetic, like trying to like if you see 5 people die, is that what? How does that compare to seeing one person die? When you think about their families, when you think about them, and etc. Um, and I would say that yours is more like this super like cerebral like just like maximize probabilities so each person feels like they have an equal chance of survival, kind of thing, rather than
I
the
mean, you
outcome.
could
So
say the
yeah,
same thing about cerebrality of it for your side as well, right? The entire thing is just based on
there's
a
nothing wrong
little
with
math problem.
cerebral. Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, right. That's what I was trying to
Well,
get
it's
at.
not. It's
And
yeah.
the
I'm not.
thing
Well, like
that you said, you need something distinguishing our views, or like that something else that motivates choosing one view over another. And I think mine has the clear advantage of not having to posit any um, extra, because unless you're saying that it's sort of just like a brute fact that the empathetic choice will always to be the utilitarian choice, I think it's clearly not,
no.
as is evident from cases like the trolley problem, where people have empathy for, say, the fat man that you push off the footbridge. Um, but if you're not, if unless you're going to say it's a brute fact, then you have to end up relying on some sort of bird's eye view or view from nowhere,
No.
according to which it is actually like the worse outcome in some deep metaphysical sense for 5 people to die than for one to die. And I'm saying, look,
It's
all we need to rely on is the perspective of each person we're taking into account.
right. So your morality, you go based on the perspectives of the individuals involved, which is noble in a sense. My morality is based upon my perspective, and in my perspective, I can easily aggregate the lives of 5 people by imagining the the empathetic response I'd have to each of them dying. So anyway, just to sum up as a closing statement real quick, we both agree on the principle of the equality of human life, and we just diverge about how we should deal with that. You think each person in a given circumstance should have an equal chance of survival. I think each person should be kind of added up, kind of pseudo-mathematically, but really more like just according to empathy, and that leads us to different conclusions. I don't really know if one is better or worse than the other, but I would say like mine is more in tune with I think most people's empathetic response. I think most people would